Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today, we are talking about a bunch of albums that I did not get the chance to properly review in September 2020. And it's actually a pretty big list, so let's not waste any time here. Let's just get right into it. First up is Under the Skin, a very surprising live acoustic album from Code Orange, modern metalcore trailblazers and one of my favorite bands. I'm sure longtime viewers of the Metal Meltdown already know this. I'm sure to some extent they're probably even sick of hearing about Code Orange. I have no shame in admitting that I am definitely what one would call a fanboy. For these reasons, I'm sure a lot of you would expect me to be head over heels in love with this new album, and while there are definitely aspects of it I admire and appreciate, I can't really say that I outright enjoy it, at least not to the extent that I've enjoyed previous Code Orange works. It has nothing to do with the performances, which I think are really good. It has nothing to do with the sound mix, which I think is really good. And it has nothing to do with the general presentation, which I also think is really good. I don't really think I've heard an acoustic album this well presented and mixed ever since the glory days of MTV Unplugged, quite frankly. But ultimately, I'm just not really feeling this because I don't think the songs themselves really transition into acoustic rock all that smoothly. And I think to some extent even they know this because some of the songs still do have a lot of electric guitar, a lot of heavy percussion, and a lot of heavy vocals. There are definitely still exceptions to even this. Take for instance Bleeding in the Blur, Who I Am, and the band's really mesmerizing cover of Down in a Hole from Alice in Chains. But all things considered, I'm just not really feeling it. It's by no means a terrible record, but it is probably my least favorite from Code Orange yet. Next up is Vertigo from Zakk Sabbath, a particularly interesting project as it shows Black Label Society and Ozzy Osbourne guitarist Zakk Wylde re-recording Black Sabbath's debut album in honor of their 50th anniversary. Definitely one of the more interesting and educated tributes we've seen to Black Sabbath as of late, as Zakk Sabbath, as Zakk Wylde and his crew, the aforementioned Zakk Sabbath, have gone out of their way to perfectly emulate and copy the original blueprint and atmosphere of the original Black Sabbath. It's honestly kind of remarkable, like they get everything right. The general vibe of the record, the tuning of the guitars, atmospheric effects and samples. Even Wylde's vocals, while significantly deeper than Ozzy's, do manage to channel a certain level of reverence and gloom similar to that of the original Black Sabbath record. Of course, by design, the album is inherently predictable, but I won't knock Zakk for doing his homework, nor will I knock him for probably putting out one of the better Black Sabbath tributes that we've heard, not just in 2020, but maybe ever. Next up is Mara from Cult of Lilith, and truthfully, I came this close to actually doing a full review of this album. There was just so much press, so much hype surrounding this album, that I felt like I almost had to. But then Oceans of Slumber frankly put out a better record, and I decided we needed to talk about that. What we've got here is pretty interesting. It's a mix of What we've got here is pretty interesting. A mix of influences from the worlds of technical death metal, melodic death metal, neoclassical, and symphonic metal fused together in a very grandeur, brutal fashion. Think early Black Dahlia Murder meets modern Cradle of Filth meets Flesh God Apocalypse, and you're kind of in the right ballpark. It's genuinely clever, it's genuinely ambitious, it's very well produced and organized and presented. It is lacking a little bit in the actual riffs department, which is a little bit of a shame, seeing as how this is a metal record. But I am nonetheless very impressed by this album, and I can definitely see why people were so excited about this when it came out. With a little fine-tuning, I'm sure that this band will release an absolute juggernaut in the future, and I look forward to hearing it. Next up is The Path from Fit for a King, an incredibly generic and forgettable piece of American metalcore tripe. I'm literally only mentioning this album because for some reason I've received a lot of requests to review this album. That's it. I am literally bringing this up out of obligation. The Path is boring. It's about as exciting as literally watching grass grow. Next up is Empire of the Blind from Heathen, and despite the fact that this is a thrash metal record and not a metalcore record, you could probably take everything I just said about Fit for a King and apply it to Empire of the Blind, and nothing really changes. Props to the band for still kicking after all these years and for persevering through the chaos of 2020, but there's just nothing especially interesting about Heathen's particular brand of thrash metal. It's generic, it's dated, and I'll probably forget about it the moment this video goes online. It really is that simple, folks. Next up is Into Lifeless Shrines from The Glorious Dead, an album that seems to be taking the underground death metal scene by storm right about now. I feel like everyone I talk to about underground death metal lately has brought up this album at least once. People are really digging it, and I can definitely see why. It is very raw, very dark, very brutal, but at the same time very clear and transparent. And of course the actual music itself, the actual songcraft itself, is as appropriately gross and gory and violent as expected for death metal, performed with the utmost enthusiasm and raw power. I enjoyed this album. Wouldn't even mind owning it on vinyl. This would be a pretty fun record to play at a pretty fucking bangin' party. Next up is Protosapien, the latest studio album from Brazilian atmospheric sludge and doom metal band Jupiterian. Keyword here, atmosphere, because there is a very thick wall of mist and fog and boggy sludge emanating out of every pore on this album. It is very immersive. It does a great job of bringing you quite comfortably, weirdly, into its sonic universe, and then just whapping you over the head with punishing riffs and fantastic extreme metal songcraft. Its monotonous droning passages and almost hypnotic soundscapes make it feel inherently kind of challenging, to the point where I probably wouldn't recommend this to anyone who isn't intimately familiar with the worlds of doom, sludge, and drone metal, but I am thoroughly impressed, and I'm especially impressed that it can manage to do all of this in a surprisingly trim package, ending the album at 38 minutes. Oh, my mistake, 35 minutes. That's even better. Holy shit. Nice job, Jupiterian. I'll be keeping a very, very close eye on you too in the future. Next up is Celle de Pierre from Vous, Autres. And no, don't give me fucking shit, because I'm well aware I probably did not pronounce that correctly. What do you want from me, man? I fucking skipped French class in high school. Give me a fucking break, alright? I enjoyed the band's previous studio album, Le Chant de Somme. I thought it was very emotive, I thought it was very lush and evocative, while still retaining the brutality and the darkness and the evil expected of black metal. But this album, Celle de Pierre, is a little bit different. It's a little bit more abrasive, a little bit more unpredictable, a little bit more angular, a little bit more avant-garde. Parts of the album remind me of Godflesh, other parts remind me of Blood Us Nord. To some extent, I'm even reminded of some kind of weird bridging point between the most minimalistic material from Aranci Pazuzu and early Ulver, if that makes any fucking sense at all. It makes this album feel very mysterious. You're constantly on the edge of your seat, as you're not quite sure where anything is going to go at any one point. It's definitely a bit of a left turn that some may not fully appreciate, but I think they pulled it off on this album, and I'm very curious to see where they continue to expand on these experimental influences and approaches in the future. Next up is Circle of Darkness from Plague Years, and this is a fucking banger. Probably one of the most hellish and cutthroat thrash metal records I've heard in 2020. Quite perfectly infusing the old school 80s metal darkness of bands like Slayer, Creator, and Possessed with the more modern grit and dirt of bands like Power Trip and Creeping Death, making for an album cram-packed with bona fide mosh pit-inducing thrash metal anthems. What more can I say, man? This thing is tighter than a fucking nun. If you're looking for something truly fucking grim in your thrash metal, this right here is where you need to go. Damn, it looks like September was a really good month for underground thrash, because we have yet another underground thrash record. This one from Evoke, entitled Seeds of Death. This album is sonically a lot more old school in comparison to the Plague Years record. dishing out simplistic thrash metal riffs and hooks, caked in the kind of aura expected of underground metal in the early to mid-80s. But Seeds of Death also has a very noticeable black metal heart and soul to it, to the point where I'd feel comfortable saying that if Venom and Watain ever fused into one, it would probably sound like Evoke. It makes for something inherently very evil, very bloodthirsty, and at times, even a little bit mysterious. The aura, the atmosphere, the general vibe of this record is so appealing, so satisfying. Unfortunately, I do think that its adherence to older heavy metal songwriting does make it feel a little bit predictable, but by no means less entertaining whatsoever. In fact, I would say I enjoyed this almost as much as that Plague Years record. Well, we've had some modern thrash, we've had some blackened thrash. All that's really left is to talk about some death thrash, so let's talk about some death thrash from Infesticide via their album Envenoming Wounds. Amazing album title, by the way. Y'all get points just for that right off the bat. Damn, these guys are out to prove a point. This thing is just full throttle from the moment it starts, from the moment it ends. I don't think Infesticide even believe in mid-paced songwriting. I think that they refuse to believe in anything even remotely slow or medium-paced. They are all about fast guitars, fast drums, fast-bassed, nasty vocals. It's so inherently chaotic that it almost accidentally adopts a kind of grindcore spirit to it. Now, don't get me wrong, I appreciate the band's commitment to intensity, to destruction, to chaos, to pure, hellish, heavy metal magic and power. But there are parts of this record where I do kind of want to look at Infesticide and go, can you just chill for a second? Can you, calm down? Eventually, the album feels so consistently wild that it just loses all of its effect and luster. And in the end, Envenoming Wounds, despite the obvious passion and enthusiasm emanating from Infesticide, feels kind of one-dimensional. I would still recommend this album, especially if you are looking for something seriously fierce and simple and brutal, but I would recommend to Infesticide in the future, it wouldn't hurt to experiment with some more mid-paced songwriting, even just for the sake of not completely overwhelming and in turn alienating some listeners like myself. Next up, you guessed it, another fucking thrash metal record. Holy shit, September really was a good month for underground thrash metal. This one comes in the form of Charring the Rotting Earth from Madrost, which itself comes by recommendation of a specific viewer here on the Metal Meltdown, Mr. Josh Allen. I feel like at this point I've used up all of my thrash metal talking points. I mean, there's really only so many times you can go, whoa, that was heavy. Whoa, that reminds me of old school band. Whoa, this makes me want to start a mosh pit. It just gets to be really repetitive, you know? This is why I often try to review a lot of different types of music on the Metal Meltdown, because I don't like repeating myself. I don't know, man. I'm getting off topic. Let's just address the obvious. It's a fucking great record. Sounds great, both sonically and musically. It's super trim, super simple, straight to the point, doesn't waste any fucking time. I wish I had more to say, Madrost, because you deserve it, but again, I've used up all my thrash metal talking points. I have nothing else to say. Nothing else to say without literally repeating anything I've already said for the last 3 fucking albums we've talked about. You know what, just pick up all these albums and just have yourself a fucking super nasty, super wild, super fucking hot thrash metal party. Do it. Do it. You, right now, you watching, do it right now. Just stop the video. Go listen to all these fucking albums and have yourself a fucking wild thrash metal time. Next up is Conduit from Proscription, and finally, something that isn't thrash metal. That's actually quite refreshing in and of itself, not gonna lie. What we've got here is a very heavy and very oppressive dose of blackened death metal, with a lot of very forceful and uncompromising riffs, deep, bellowing, demonic vocals, harrowing percussion. The album feels absolutely massive. It seems to stand over you like some kind of dark warlord commanding you to bow to him. Patience may need to be exercised here, as it is a remarkably heavy and dense and uncompromising listen. But damn, I'll give the band credit. It ultimately still makes for some genuinely incredible material. I'm especially astounded by the actual production value of this record. Like, this is the kind of shit I would expect from a band like Behemoth, not an underground black death metal band. Big time props to Proscription here. I'm definitely gonna have to keep an eye out on y'all. Y'all are clearly gonna be a force to be reckoned with at this rate. And finally, let's finish things off by talking about a few albums that members of the Metal Meltdown community may or may not be a part of. The first of these albums is Mortal Domain from Incremate, which can be very easily and quickly described as fun, old-school death metal. There aren't exactly any bells and whistles here, and you're not exactly going to find the most innovative songwriting within the genre, but you are going to find a very reliable, a very consistent, and a very authentic old-school death metal experience, chock full of the usual gory fun that we expect from this genre. And at the end of the day, ain't that what really matters? I think so, at least. Check it out. Next up, an EP released by slam and brutal death metal crew Idol, and it is called Dissolution of Pulgasari? Pulgasari? Am I fucking blind? Am I going fucking blind right now? Am I illiterate all of a sudden? What the fuck? I legit can't read this. Oh, I'm gonna chalk this up to the fact that I need to go to sleep. Thank God we're near the end of this. And I gotta say, points right off the bat for making this an EP and not a full studio album. Because as much as I do enjoy some slam every now and then, it is perhaps the most repetitive genre by default and gets very tiring after about 12 minutes. And for the 12 minutes that Dissolution of word I can't pronounce for some reason runs for, it is a genuinely entertaining experience. It is heavy, it is crushing, it is in your face, it is everything that this genre needs to be in a significantly tighter and more cohesive package than I am frankly used to. Thank you, Idol, and here's a note to every other slam band in the world. Stop making 40-minute albums and invest instead in 12-minute EPs. It makes everyone's life easier. And finally, we have Gaslit Dystopia from Faith in Ruin, which I probably enjoyed the least out of these albums that were sent to me. It's just kind of a cookie-cutter metalcore record that lacks originality and, frankly, polish. It can be fun if you're just looking for a really fucking simple melodic metalcore record, and I'm just clearly not. Plain and simple, you know? No disrespect to Faith in Ruin. Y'all seem like cool dudes, but I'm just not really feeling this, and it would be very disingenuous of me to suggest otherwise, so, yeah. Alright, that's it. That's officially it. Oh, I'm going to bed now. I'm going to fucking bed. Why did I agree to stay up late and do this? Why did I agree to this? As usual, let me know what other albums you feel I missed within the past month. Click this button here to subscribe and get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, and you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.